What's going on, Bitcoin accumulation country? My name is Phil. This is the Fun with Bitcoin podcast. This is season 3, episode 2. Hope everybody's having a great week. I've got a really great interview with Cory Klippsten from Givebitcoin.io. We had a really great chat and totally even went a little bit out there, and I kind of teased in my tweet about the 4 Ds of Bitcoin and how he may have invented them. But anyways, you guys will see how that rolls out in the conversation. Anyways, without further ado, here is my awesome conversation with Cory Klippsten from Givebitcoin.io. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me. I've got somebody that I met on Twitter who started a very interesting project who I think is going to be a major part of helping to onboard, the next many millions of people, and really going to help to get people to understand Bitcoin and to hold it properly. I am talking about Mr. Cory Klippsten from Givebitcoin.io. Cory, thank you very much for coming on my show. I really, really appreciate it.
No, it's an honor, man. Glad to be here.
Very cool. So before we get into Givebitcoin, I always, for first-time guests, I always like to talk about the rabbit hole story. And to be perfectly honest, even though you and I go back and forth a lot on Twitter and we're in a lot of the same groups, I don't know much about your rabbit hole story. So how did, where do you want to start, Like, how did you, before you got into Bitcoin, where did you come from and how are we here?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll do it this way. I'll keep it high level, and if something is interesting to you, you can drill down as deep as you want to go.
Cool.
And we'll see if there are like branches of the rabbit hole. So let's see. Born in the Bay Area, long ago, to parents that met on Haight-Ashbury, and I was like raised more or less on a commune until I was about 8 or 9. So that's an interesting beginning. And I find that interesting just because it kind of always made me, I didn't grow up in the system the way that we kind of think about it. So I was kind of like already out of the matrix at the beginning. And then I like got shoved into it as a young child when I was still very curious. And it always made me kind of like wonder and question what I was seeing and what I was hearing. And I didn't put much stock in the words of authority of authority in school and things like that. So there were a lot of things that kind of branched onto that. Interestingly, I then kind of the arc of my school and professional career went completely the opposite direction that you would think from that beginning. Most of my cohort from Northern Cali back then are, artists, musicians, marijuana farmers, whatever. And in my case, I went off to college and went to go work for Microsoft and then Morgan Stanley, and went to business school at University of Chicago with a bunch of us economics fans. Ended up at McKinsey & Company, the management consulting firm, did private equity, went to Google, and finally got into startups back on the West Coast after being out east for about 19 years. I came out here back to California in 2013. And I've been in startups for the last 7 years. So that sets the table for Bitcoin.
I was going to say, I already have to ask you questions because...
Go ahead.
Yeah, because, okay, so I definitely want to understand. So, like, Microsoft to Morgan Stanley. So was it like, because I'm familiar with both of those companies. The line of work that I'm in works with those companies. So probably not in the way that most people think, but... how do they relate? Was it tech?
Yeah, it's all tech, internet related. So at Microsoft, I was working on an early interactive television product out in New York. And it was really just, I was in New York and I was seeing all of the money sloshing around New York. And I was like, how do these people get this money? Like, I'm not making that money. What is that? Can you go to school for that? And so I remember it was like summer of 2000, I learned the term MBA. I was like already done with college and already working, and I learned that there was this thing called business school that some people try really hard to get into. And so I decided I would probably try to do that. And I figured since I was a broadcast major in undergrad and all liberal arts and working in tech, I should probably learn a little bit of finance before I went off to business school. And so I applied to Citibank and Morgan Stanley and got a job with Morgan Stanley in high net worth private client marketing. basically just doing all their online, presentations. And basically, they're just trying to sell, crappy mutual funds with big loads to high net worth individuals. And that was putting together like video and multimedia presentation and things like that to market to those people.
Oh, cool.
It wasn't, but
I mean, it gives experience.
It was a good experience. I mean, if you really want to go down the foundational story rabbit hole, I was in Tower 2 working on the 64th floor until 9/11. So then my building fell down and I decided to not go to school in New York and I went off to Chicago instead.
Okay, that's definitely that's pretty scary stuff.
That was deep. It's crazy that we're still dealing with it now, isn't it?
I mean, it is. We're
19 years later.
Yeah, 19 years later, still dealing with the fallout. Yeah, it's interesting how something like that happens, and it really does, touch people from everywhere. Like, I'm originally from Montreal, and one of my father's customers, his son, just so happened that he called out sick that day.
Yeah.
And he worked in those buildings, in one of the buildings. So.
Yeah.
And up in one of those floors, so it just so happened. So yeah,
wow.
But okay, so let's go. You mentioned Google. Did you work? So I also, and I'm gonna word it the way I feel, but I also unfortunately have some loose affiliation with that company. And so did you work for them before they were evil?
It was probably. Yeah, I'd say before. It was like in the crossover period. It was just like kind of, they were still deciding whether or not to go more Kylo or a little more Luke. And yeah, they chose red. I don't know.
Yeah.
I still, it's funny. I mean, Google still does so much good in the world and for the world. Like, it is hard to say that, but power does corrupt and capitalism does what capitalism does. And when you've got to keep making your numbers, you start making choices, and it's not ever any one person. You can have like 100,000 people that do the right thing 98% of the time, but if that 2% is certain people, and those decisions build on top of each other, all of a sudden you can be doing something totally different than what you supposed you wanted to do. That was there 2011 to 2013. It was a great experience. I basically went there just as a springboard to get out of like private equity and consulting and get into startups. I already knew I wanted to be in startups, but I couldn't get from consulting to the startup world. I needed to like have some tech bona fides, and VCs will always take a meeting if you're writing from a google.com address. So that's how I met everybody on the West Coast was through that.
Yeah, you definitely make a lot of good hookups through Google. I've met a lot of really interesting people through that company, and also Facebook. Facebook has some really, really talented, decent people working there. So tell me, when at this point now, you said 2011, 2013. So yeah. Bitcoin's already humming along. So
it sucks, man. I wish I had known. So that I just found out there were more than 100 people in like an internal Google message board specifically talking about Bitcoin in 2011. I was not one of those people. For me, it wasn't until, so I have Bitcoin in my Gmail account from 2012. Don't remember ever seeing it. And then I was at a tech conference after leaving Google and getting into startups. I was at a tech conference January 29th, 2014. And someone had a blockchain wallet and was, getting people to sign up for blockchain wallets and giving them $50 worth of Bitcoin. And so that was the first time that I owned some Bitcoin. I proceeded to not read the white paper, not go down the rabbit hole, and lose the private keys. So that sucks. And then it wasn't until 3 years later, in the price run-up of spring 2017, that finally got my attention again. So I jumped in with 2 feet in May of 17, read Digital Gold, started reading the blogs, listening to podcasts. It has been probably about 50 hours a week ever since. It's just this thing that took over my life and my brain, and I finally over the past year have been able to really start to give back what it's given me, which is pretty cool.
Well, let's talk about that, right? That's I think that we're leading into where you decided to create Givebitcoin.
Yeah.
Hey, let's dive into that. So So you
Okay.
said like that you started to give back. Is that I guess what's your intention?
Yeah, well, I mean, I just mean like creating something that helps Bitcoin. And the origin story of the product is basically like, yeah, I'd like to go back in time and onboard myself better better than I did. Like the gift might have worked, but most people it doesn't really work. It doesn't take. So there must be something that you've got to wrap around that. Even though it's not perfect, it still is generally outside of spending a few hundred hours with somebody and like educating them yourself. Giving has been one of the things that has gotten a lot of people interested. Then the other thing was, by that fall of 2017, I was totally comfortable giving investment advice to friends and family and telling them to buy Bitcoin. But it took 18 full months before I could get my parents off zero and get them to buy some Bitcoin in March of 2019. So kind of like those two things kind of fed into having the idea for Give Bitcoin. I had been trying to figure out some way to just talk about Bitcoin and just basically sell Bitcoin and make money doing that for almost a year. I started that as my goal for my career at the beginning of September of 2018, and I worked on a closed-end fund with the former Guggenheim Partners manager, like trying to figure out how to like put Bitcoin and some levered treasuries into a closed-end fund that we could get listed a lot faster than these ETFs. That looks like it probably will actually happen. The guy's still working on it, but I just realized after we kind of got it started that those meetings would all be with like fund managers and institutions in New York, and I don't plan to travel to New York and do those sales meetings. So I started thinking about like what can I do for consumers, and just stacking all winter and just kind of like listening to podcasts and starting Telegram groups and joining them, and just mixing it up and trying to be helpful to people while continuing to do kind of my traditional like angel investing and advising for non-Bitcoin startups. And it was finally it was April 10th of 2019, and I was doing one of my usual like monthly happy hours for founders and investors, and it was up in San Francisco, and a couple of good Bitcoiners, including a pretty famous one, was there, and I asked him to pitch Bitcoin to one of my CEO friends from the Valley that's not a Bitcoiner. And this person is so eloquent and has so many arrows in his quiver and is just like amazing, and it still doesn't take. And so it was like, I was like a couple beers deep, and then I had another whiskey on the flight back to LA, and it just hit me. It was like, it's not fucking possible. This thing that I've been trying to do for the last 9 months, trying to get better at pitching Bitcoin, like it's at best hit and miss, and for the most part clearly could be improved upon. And the idea just kind of came out fully formed. It was basically like, give somebody some Bitcoin, but hold on to it with a third party. They can't touch it, but that's you, the gifter, don't own it anymore, because nobody wants to like still have the private keys. You want to actually give somebody something that they own. And then while it's kind of locked up in that escrow for that year, you educate them about Bitcoin. And as the giver, you basically can outsource all of that to us. So we handle the escrow and we handle the education, and you've got like a pretty darn good shot at red pilling your friend or family or colleague or nephew or whatever it is. Even boomers, it's working on boomers too.
So I think this is absolutely amazing. And I just, I guess, okay, so I'm going to ask this. It's just going to be like as basic as possible. So let's say because I told my wife about your idea and what you're doing. And so she had a couple of questions for me. And I guess, so look, let's say I decide I want to do this. Okay. Like, if you could just take me through some, like the basic steps of how I would be able to, give Bitcoin to my wife in this way.
All right. So everyone listening to Phil's podcast, we're going to get out our laptops or our phones. We're going to go to givebitcoin.io. You're going to think about someone in your life that you love, that you want to share this beautiful orange future with. And you're going to think about their email address, and you're going to click give, and you're going to enter their name and their email address in a nice little note. What would you say to your wife? Honey,
I love you.
I love you. I love you even more than the honey badger or something like that.
Something nice. I love you so much, I'm giving you Bitcoin.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. So now you've got that's all you need. You don't need the KYC or anything to give.
No.
Yeah. And then the next screen is just going to be log into your bank account with Plaid. So if it's already pre-filled in your browser or whatever, like you're funded basically right there. And that's it. You'll just say done. The gift notification now goes to the recipient. You can schedule it. So if you have like a birthday or Christmas or bar mitzvah coming up, you can have it arrive on a certain day. We built that just in time for Christmas. It was great.
That's awesome.
And that's it. And then the recipient will get a note in their email that says they have been, given the gift of Bitcoin, the thoughtful gift of better money, as we like to say. And they click accept. The recipient is actually opening a little account, essentially at Prime Trust, which is a big custodian that's used by Binance, Bittrex, Wobi, OKX, a bunch of funds and companies. So we just use the same as all those guys. It's Fireblocks on the back end, about as good as you can get for security. So they do have to KYC. It sucks, but that's the world that we live in. If you want to use this escrow function and you want to accept, Bitcoin for any service or accept money for Bitcoin in any way, like, you do have to KYC. So they upload a license and put in their address, and then only at that point is your bank account actually charged, which is actually a huge deal, because this means that I can go to like CES, for instance, like if I was in Vegas this week and meeting a bunch of randoms, I could be giving Bitcoin away like willy-nilly and know that only those people that are going to be bludgeoned with awesome education from like Safety and Stefan and Matt Odell and all these awesome Bitcoiners over the next 12 months, only those people is my bank account going to get hit. So I've done this, like I've tested it. Like I was at a holiday party for Graycroft, which is like Alan Patrick Hoff's venture fund out in New York and LA, and hundreds of people there. I probably gave like 30 people Bitcoin, and some of those came with like longer conversations and some of them didn't. And about 10 people actually accepted the gift, and now we kind of like have a little connection. They got some Bitcoin from me, and the other ones, it didn't cost me anything.
That's actually amazing.
Yeah, I think it's a nice feature. People undersell that, but it makes the friction of like your decision to start that gifting process is just gone. Unlike, I'm stingy. If I was like gonna like load up, a USB key with some Bitcoin, like who I'm giving that to, the bar's high.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't know if you've ever had this conversation, but like, would you tell somebody you hate about Bitcoin? Like somebody who you just, if you actually, like there's some people who just don't hate anybody, but like, like for the reality is most people, like it's, most of us are not emotionally intelligent enough to get to that point, and, we'll feel whatever feelings of resentment.
You just tell them that it's for terrorists and child pornographers. That's it. Just tell them that.
But think about it. Like, would you? I mean, I've thought about it, and it's like, you know what? No, I don't tell them about Bitcoin.
Why are you talking to people that you hate, man?
Well, like, sometimes it happens at work.
Bitcoiners.
It happens. You can't just always just meet everybody you like. Sometimes it happens. And then somebody will come and talk to you about Bitcoin, and then all of a sudden, now they're asking you, and you don't necessarily like them, and you don't want them hodling. So I know it sounds ridiculous, but
Bitcoin is for enemies. We know this, and you know what?
I love that quote.
Someone who is basically like irredeemable in every other way, if they want to be a long-term hodler of Bitcoin, they're doing one of the best things that they could possibly do for humanity and the planet.
It's funny that some shitcoiners have managed to convince themselves otherwise and no coiners, but it really, what people don't realize is that when your base of money is higher quality, everything that stems from it is also higher quality. So I think that people don't get that yet.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Cool.
That was like the TLDR of the middle chapters of the Bitcoin Standard.
I actually, you know what? I'm like halfway through it. It's terrible. I've only
books, man. Just listen to it if you can't read it.
Yeah, I plan to. I actually just live off of Audible now. I don't know how I don't know how much you use Audible, but for me, especially when it comes to Bitcoin, sitting in traffic, it's like I may as well be getting educated.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. So on that note, I feel like we should, at least acknowledge what you have in your hand there, and give a shout out to Matt and Marty for starting this
You know what?
Bitcoin whiskey tradition.
You're absolutely right. I've never actually drank or cheered on a podcast, so this is the first time. So Tales from the Crypt,
That's a TFTC boys. We love you. That's a Glenfiddich 14-year. Good for you.
Yep.
I have,
what do you got?
This is from my friend Suntory Whiskey Moto.
I like that.
Little Suntory. I drew a number 21 out of 21 out there, but it's not actually a small batch whiskey. But it is really good. Go Japan.
That's all that matters.
Whiskey.
Cheers.
Cheers. My my wife actually saw a picture of this shelf that I put on Twitter that has all my Bitcoin books and my whiskey, and she was puzzled as to why the whiskey wasn't full. She was like, "Who are you drinking with?" I'm like, "Hey, I'm sorry, I'm drinking with my friends. Like, we're not in the same room, but that's just what we do on these podcasts."
So I have to admit, I've never done that before, but you inspired me, so thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt and Marty, and just let's make sure that always continues. It's great.
So, you know what? Talking about Matt and Marty, definitely one of the first podcasts I started listening to, podcast I still listen to. I interviewed Matt. He is absolutely one of the coolest Bitcoiners I know, just one of the chillest. So my question to you is, I guess, what was some of the first material? I could tell you right now, I've got two things, right? I've got the Naval interview with Nick Szabo, and I've got Andreas Antonopoulos, 50 currencies that are worth less than goat shit. Okay? And then I've got all TFTC podcasts. For me, that was all of my starting point, and then from that I branched into Noted. So my question to you is, what was some of your original material that totally got you to stick with Bitcoin and say, you know what, I get this?
Well, I mean, I really do have to I have to credit the guy that forced me to read Digital Gold before anything else. It's an old book. It's 2014. It's pretty dated at this point, but it was such a well-written book. I think I've read it 3 times over the years, and it's just it was a nice way in. When I recommend things to people, if they're kind of professional class or whatever, it's usually VJ's article, Bullish Case for Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. For a long time, it was that Tim Ferriss, Naval, Nick Szabo, but it's 2.5 hours. 224 or something.
It's tough.
I've sent a lot of people to just Stefan's only solo dolo episode 71, where he just kind of runs through Austrian economic thought and Bitcoin. But even that's kind of for people that are a little bit more Bitcoin finance, kind of up for that. I think, as far as the podcast that I probably binge listened to first, it was definitely TFTC, and just going back, way back into the catalog. And then it was Stefan after that, because Stefan came out last summer, I think, summer of 18, I should say. So more than a year and a half now. And I listened to every single one of his up through about 80 or 90, and then I got super busy with this. I just listen to select ones now. So I think that's been great. So it's no surprise at all that I think Matt was probably the 3rd or 4th person that I talked to about this project. And then I forced VJ to introduce me to Stefan, so that I could talk to him and rope him into this as well. So that worked out.
And I'll tell you this, okay? At least from my perspective, and I would say a lot of, I don't want to speak out of turn for the, Taco Carnivore Bitcoin plebes, but I would say that, and shout out to them, of course. But Stefan is a Bitcoiner's Bitcoiner. So for him to endorse it, to me anyways, that's huge, So kudos to you. Kudos to you, and
thank you.
kudos
Yeah,
to putting together this idea creatively like this. I mean, this is how ingenuity works.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's funny. People argue sometimes. I had this discussion actually with 6102, who's one of the most brilliant people in Bitcoin. If you're not following 6102 and checking out Bitcoin Intro and Bitcoin Only,
shout out to him.
Yeah, really good stuff. But we had a back and forth on Telegram over the weekend, basically just saying, by the way, it might be a she, I don't know. So anyway, 6102 person was basically saying, like, Bitcoin is like air, Bitcoin sells itself. And I'm like, I just don't think so. I think, like, you can absolutely market Bitcoin better and sell Bitcoin better. And not only that, that's literally what you spend your entire day on all the time. Like, that's what you're doing. Like, you might call it education, but education is marketing. So I'm a huge fan of just educating about Bitcoin. And if you can educate somebody, yes, of course, then it sells itself. But they have to know about it. So we're like we're an education first company. We did put out a press release on the Monday before Christmas. So if it hasn't been on a podcast yet, I might as well tell you. Jan Pritzker has joined us as CTO and co-founder.
That's amazing.
So amazing for us. I mean, he's like a 20-year Silicon Valley tech leader. He just company he co-founded, Reverb, just sold to Etsy for like 275 mil last year. Like, he's just a killer talent. And, in my view, I think, from a standing start, I think inventing Bitcoin is actually the best one. Because it's like a 2-hour read, it's 100 pages. Like, that's the book that, like, Dan Tapiero took 20 copies with when he went through a tour of Asia, and he was leaving that on everybody's desks. So, I just think the combination of his tech skills and know-how, and that he is an educator and, like, goes to high schools and talks about Bitcoin and, like, can't stop talking about Bitcoin, and in fact quit that company a year before the exit because he couldn't stop talking about Bitcoin. So, like, that's the perfect person to be doing this with. So I'm on board. And then the other big announcement is Brady from Citizen Bitcoin has joined us as head of marketing.
Oh my gosh, that is awesome.
Yeah, so,
that's really cool.
Just ramping up and getting moving and raising more money now. We just raised a little bit in Q3, and now we're doing like a profit seed round, a couple mil, and it's good.
That is amazing. I actually I met Citizen Bitcoin, Brady, in one of the Discord channels for Bitcoin and Markets. I don't know if you ever listened to that podcast from Ansel Lindner. Shout out to Ansel, because Ansel has been in the game for very long and has been giving solid information from the start. I mean, if there's anybody that is, true signal, Ansel is a signal guy. So it was really cool, and a whole bunch of us podcasters got together. Nice. And I got to meet Brady. So that's awesome. I have a cool. I haven't met him in person yet, of course, but man, he's definitely one of my favorite people in Bitcoin.
So I went to Mizzou for undergrad, and Brady lives in Lawrence, Kansas. So it's a little hard to deal with the Jayhawk talk sometimes, but we're actually, because Bitcoin 2020 is during March Madness this year. We're planning to do like a Ballers in Bitcoin kind of show live from the rooftop there with us. Jack Mahlers, I guess, is a huge dookie. So we're going to kind of find a Bitcoiner from each of kind of the big basketball schools and just duel it out over Bitcoin and basketball.
You know what? You're talking about the San Francisco conference?
Yeah.
I will be there.
I will see you there.
I've got my ticket, man. I am super excited. I missed last year's. I went to the MIT Bitcoin Expo. Nothing wrong with that. But it's like I picked my poison. And this year I'm like, no, you know what? I'm doing San Fran.
Awesome.
So I'm super excited to meet you.
Yeah, it was insanely fun last year. I hope it's timed for a crazy pump like it was in June of 19. I mean, it was literally the first night of the conference that it went to 13.8.
Yeah.
It was so silly. There were so many just like drunk Bitcoiners chanting in the street. I was like both proud and embarrassed.
It's true. It's true. That's funny. Proud and embarrassed. That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Oh my
Listen,
gosh.
man, it's gonna be a two-sided coin, literally, for another couple cycles.
You know,
Like, we're all pretty annoying at this point when we're like the 0.1% of humans on the globe with $100 or more of Bitcoin.
yeah. But that's
That's why we
okay.
have to talk to each other, because we just annoy everybody else.
You know what? It's funny that you say that, right? Because like at this point, you know what? I was thinking about this. I've probably forgotten more rebuttals than I know. You know, like in terms of like arguing, like why Bitcoin over gold, why Bitcoin over shitcoins, you know, why Bitcoin over no coining. Like it's like at this point, I think I've forgotten all the rebuttals, and it's like people start to argue with you, and it's like, you know what? Just if you're not going to read up on it,
Yeah.
I'm done. But I know that that's the wrong attitude.
Yeah, I mean, I have to talk about it because we don't raise money only from Bitcoiners. We also raise money from like normal VCs and angels as well. So I do kind of have to like actually pitch Bitcoin sometimes. But I also kind of ask them to read our long appendix, which is it's 3 separate appendices that are like my favorite Bitcoin slides from Jan, from CoinShares, and from Fundstrat. And by the time they get through like 50 slides of Bitcoin, then I'm like, okay, now we can talk about my company. But we put that out on Twitter. I think it's from the Save Bitcoin handle, which we haven't talked about, by the way. We have another product coming out this quarter.
Yeah.
And this is, I think it was probably, I'd been trying to recruit Jan for a long time. He's always been involved as an advisor since the summer, but I'd been, thinking that he ought to be on the team properly for a while. And I think it was when we decided to break out Save Bitcoin and have a recurring purchase, dollar cost average, separate platform outside of Givebitcoin that got him really excited about making this company the Bitcoin on-ramp. So we're going through a rebrand right now. We're actually going to be Swan Bitcoin, SWAN. And we have 2 products, Givebitcoin and Save Bitcoin.
Cool. Okay, we're gonna put links to that in the show notes.
Yeah. I mean, right now Swan Bitcoin just redirects to Givebitcoin, and Save Bitcoin doesn't exist, but it will soon. And I think it's going to be really powerful. I think having something that's just like uniquely focused on the user experience of coming to Bitcoin and buying some Bitcoin, and not having that buried in an exchange or a payments app, and just being like super focused on that user acquisition funnel and that user experience. We think there's a lot of upside for just being a Bitcoin only on ramp.
That's okay. So you know what? You mentioned something very interesting, right? Being a Bitcoin only on ramp. Why did you choose to be Bitcoin only? Like I obviously totally agree.
I was gonna let you buy Zimbabwean dollars and Bitcoin, but there just wasn't that much demand for the Zimbabwean dollars. And then somebody suggested Bolivares, I think. And then some other people suggested like Ripple and Tron. And I was like, I'm not going to do Bolivares, Ripple, or Tron. Like, I'd rather have the Zimbabwean dollars.
Oh my God.
No, I think the
that's great.
answer, like, listen, I try not to be that much of a dick about it. And here's why. I think that all humans will be Bitcoiners in the not too distant future. And what people are going to remember is not whether you were right. They're going to remember whether you were an asshole. So I think it's basically like, just be nice to people. You can be mean to people that actually wish you ill, or that are trying to do like affinity marketing scams. And then it's knives out, and that's fine. And like, that's why Nakamoto weekend was so fun. Like I worked all weekend. I don't know about you.
Oh man. You know what? That was so. You know what? Okay, it's going to be a terrible humble brag and whatever, but Nathaniel Whitmore, the guy that does the long reads, he actually he quoted my meme, which is huge, because I'm so not a mimetic artist in any way, shape, or form. I was just like, oh my god. I'm like, this is it. I did the, it's the Trojan horse in front of the castle.
That was great. That was beautiful.
I was shocked, and it like he chose it. So to your point, yeah, man, that was a great weekend. But okay, so let's talk about that, because in the Taco Carnivore Bitcoin plebes group, one of the gentlemen there mentioned back that he was slightly disappointed by our performance, by the performance this weekend, even though it held up pretty well. I don't know if you saw Martin's responses back. But he brings up some good points, about how we should argue with each other in our own echo chamber. But I really enjoyed, going back to this Nakamoto.com thing. I really enjoyed exposing this absolute shitcoinery, in Bitcoin clothing, because that is exactly what it was.
Yeah. I mean, here's the interesting thing. If you listen to Balaji on, I know he's gonna sit with McCormick again, but he did one like maybe 3 months ago. I don't think he knows. I think that he was like so much the Bitcoin guy in Silicon Valley in like 2013, 2014 when he was working on 21E6, that it's almost like his shit don't stink, and he can't imagine that people would think that he wasn't pro Bitcoin. And it's just hard. He's moved to Austin recently, and this is on the heels of the announcement like a month or two ago about that new startup that he's funding and involved with the seasteading guys, that's going to basically treat cities as a product and create new cities, or get involved with like local government and try basically create new governance models and new business friendly, economic zones and things like that. Like that kind of stuff is awesome.
Sure.
And so he's now moved to Austin, and I guess he's been trying to, reconnect or connect for the first time with a lot of the Bitcoiners down there, and like trying to listen sometimes at barbecues and things like that. And supposedly Nakamoto-Con, or not Komodo, or whatever you want to call it, is supposed to be like stage one in kind of like, crypto-fying these cities or something like that. And I just think he's totally tone deaf, and in the way he marketed the thing, it had outright, falsehoods in the marketing, like saying that every contributor was pro Bitcoin when it has Roger Ver and Vitalik and Zuko and all these people. And then kind of like an unwillingness to listen or change on the fly. As an example, so the right way to do it is like Wences. Wences was on the wrong side of UISF, right? Mm-hmm. But man, he was contrite, and he, said, I got this wrong. I saw it differently. I thought I was doing like the right thing for Bitcoin. Like I see it now. Does anybody dislike Wences? I love that dude.
Absolutely.
Right? And like, so if you show some contrition and you actually show that you can listen to people, I went through it over Christmas, by the way, because I always loved the word. I always loved the word time lock, because the word time lock, it means like something is locked for a period of time.
Yeah.
And our one of our taglines, since the beginning was always like give plus time lock plus educate. I said that, from the stage at Bitcoin 2019. And as we actually like launched and it kind of went wider, obviously some people noted like, hey, like time lock is like a thing in Bitcoin, and it's like, you can have an on-chain time lock, and that's confusing. Like, is this another Coinbase that's jacking a Bitcoin term to use for their own purposes? And I was like, but it also means this other thing. And they're like, yeah, it's just confusing, and we don't want to like, scam people. Like the more I thought about it, I was like, yes, I'm kind of married to this, but I also like, it's also not worth it. And so we just brainstormed on Twitter, and a bunch of people joined in, and like we tried like 15 other things that we could call it, and we just decided to call it escrow. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
It's not worth confusing people. It's not worth pissing people off. Like, do right by Bitcoin and Bitcoiners as much as you possibly can, and all is right with the world.
I love that. I love your mantra. That is amazing, and I love that you're a Bitcoin only company. It makes me definitely.
Well, the other way I often answer that is, I was like, well, we think that people actually like their friends and family. They're like, why do you only let them give Bitcoin? I'm like, well, do you like them or don't you? Like, if you like them, why would you give them something else?
Yeah, why would you shitcoin them? Like, why would you do that to them? Here, keep experiencing loss. Let me give you loss, the gift of loss. That's not a gift. Oh man, but yeah, that is definitely definitely funny stuff. So so you enjoyed Nakamoto.com weekend. I definitely did as well.
Yeah,
it was good times.
I don't wish them ill. I wish them truth. Like, I just want them to change the marketing page. I don't care. It's fine to have a crypto blog. It's all good. And you know what? If the marketing was honest, I'd have absolutely no problem with Tor or, Lop or any of these people actually contributing to it. That's fine. If there are eyeballs and they're going to be talking about cryptocurrency, then I want Bitcoiners to be there.
Did you go to the Telegram group? Oh, sorry. Go.
So that's what I said when it first came out. After 48 hours of watching the way that Balaji does not take feedback and is incapable of changing his plan, and then also watching it roll out, obviously, with Vitalik and Zuko as the admins, along with the community manager from Ethereum Foundation, plus Balaji and Joe McCann. So there's 5 moderators. Joe's a trader and runs a paid trading group and works for Microsoft and stuff like that. He's an okay guy. It's fine. He's tech friends with Balaji. He's one of the founders of NodeSource or Node.js. So he's no dummy and whatever. He gets a pass from me because he doesn't care. He's a trader. The other guys that's no cohort to be moderating as opposed to the pro Bitcoin Telegram group. So yeah. So yeah, once I actually saw what the intent was and that it wasn't just about a mistake in the copy and the whole intent of this thing is to put out a bunch of stuff by Brian Armstrong and stuff. It's well, no, now I kind of think that Bitcoiners should all just shun it. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean that is just it was a huge disappointment, and it was really nice to see Tur pull out of it, and from what I understood, some of these contributors were not entirely told the whole story when they originally signed up. From what I understood.
Yeah, I mean I'm in contact with all of these people one-on-one, including Balaji.
Okay.
So that's why I know so much about it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm your knowledge about it's incredible. I'm I read through tons of stuff. I didn't get any of this.
Yeah. So I think, Jameson was okay with the fact that people had to agree to a statement that said, I am pro Bitcoin in parentheses BTC. And that was enough for him because he just thought it was kind of funny that Vitalik and Roger had to sign that. Or had to agree to that term. So for him, that was funny enough that they had to come under the Bitcoin flag, and they're actually publishing under a Bitcoin flag. I kind of get that. I mean, Jameson to me, he can run Gren and he can say that, and I almost don't give a shit because he's such a badass. He's proven himself more than enough.
Yeah.
I, on the other hand, had I been an original contributor, I would have had to unsign up within an hour of launch, because I don't have any sort of credibility or history of real contributions to Bitcoin.
Well, hold on a second. Givebitcoin, you know what? It's going to be interesting in 10 years from now, my friend. You'll see.
I hope it's interesting more sooner than that.
Oh no, of course. By
the way, so we did have an awesome holiday season. So thank you to everybody out there that tried us out. We had a goal that we had set for number of gifts and the amount of money we hoped would be gifted over the holiday season, and did 2.2x, 120% better than our goals on the number of gifts, and about 90% better on revenue than we had planned. So off to a really good start. It's made fundraising so far over the first week of January go really easy. So thanks for the numbers, Bitcoin.
That's absolutely amazing. Seriously.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we can grow a little bit and hire some more Bitcoiners.
So besides, so you were mentioning you're going to have Givebitcoin, Save Bitcoin. You were mentioning, you were mentioning Swan Bitcoin. So,
So Swan is the company.
Yeah.
And Swan has 2 products. Give
Give and
means I'm
save.
gonna buy Bitcoin for somebody else. Save means I'm going to buy Bitcoin for myself. That's it. There's only two people you can buy Bitcoin for: yourself or somebody else.
Me and
And
you.
so I think everything just is bucketed under those two. And we just like the name Swan. You got to have a name. And, I'm a huge Taleb guy. I've been reading him since 2002. Really like governed a lot of my career choices and kind of like the way I think about life as a call option and all these different things. And so I'm partial to that. The logo is definitely a black swan. And then we also think that, Bitcoin in its first decade has been a little bit of an ugly duckling. And, with the help of Bitcoiners like your listeners and companies like ours, we believe that Bitcoin is increasingly becoming a beautiful swan.
I agree, and I'm also a huge Taleb fan. I recently got the the 5-book Inserto. Yes, that's right. Let's see that. I thought I saw it behind you there.
You've got.
There's some books there.
Yeah, well, I've read Anti-Fragile 9 times.
How amazing is that book?
It's the best, and I've probably listened to it another 3.
Yeah.
But I got all of them, man. Dude, I've reread the frickin' Maxims book, Bed of Procrustes, like 6 times. That's probably got to be a record, right?
Oh my gosh.
That's like him at his most pontificating, and I just eat it up, and I have it all marked up and starred and check marked and noted and all this stuff. It's so funny.
It's fantastic. Okay, so you bookmark all your stuff also. I usually bookmark it all, and then I'll go back and then write down what he said, just so that I can remember it, because usually I can't. So, yeah, no, Taleb is interesting in terms of Bitcoin, right? Because he describes, like, in terms of Black Swan, right? He describes like all these Black Swan events, and I got to be honest, only once I listened to Taleb did I really understand that Bitcoin is fiat's Black Swan.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, that's right. But I mean, it's a Black Swan to so many different things, but
True.
it's definitely the biggest Black Swan that's happened in our lives.
Oh yeah.
Like, there's nothing that's come out of left field like that. I mean, the internet was like a slow progression, and it was there for people to see all along, and like I think it was just kind of like slowly progressing more and more and more. So like, maybe it was, I think somebody called it a black elephant. It was like somebody, like, you're not talking about it, but it's clear that that thing is there. We're kind of aware of the internet. It just became bigger and bigger over time. Like, until you're aware of Bitcoin, like, you're just not aware of it at all.
That's true. That's absolutely true.
I mean, how many people like really were paying attention to digital cash? It had like its own little bubble of like hundreds or maybe a few thousand people working on it in the 90s, and then everybody kind of gave up, and it was pretty dormant in the thousands until this.
It's money for nerds. You know what I mean? I mean, like, no joke. I mean, I kid you not. Even me as a nerd, like, I remember hanging out with my buddy that reprogrammed satellite dishes, and hacked dishes for fun. And I remember him telling me about this digital currency, and I was just sitting there, and I'm like, who cares? Nobody's going to use this. I'm like, it's just going to be a couple of people that are just going to use it, and then it disappears. And I'm thinking Chuck E. Cheese, and I'm thinking all these tokens. So just like everybody else, like the cliches,
Yeah.
We're so stupid till we're not.
Yeah, it is just, it's the most fascinating, eye-opening, world-expanding, potentially world-saving. I'm sure you've had people talk about Peter Thiel's quadrant on your show, or maybe not. All right, I love this one. And
I know nothing about it. Yeah.
But basically, it's just that you can either be optimistic or pessimistic as a person or a society, and then you can be basically like deterministic, or like whatever the opposite of that is, indeterminate or something like that. And basically, if you look at like kind of different cultures, and he kind of talks about this in the book 0 to 1, about how different cultures are kind of like indefinitely optimistic. Oh, it's definite and indefinite, pessimist and optimist. And so like the Chinese as a culture are definitely pessimistic, which means that they have a sense of where they're going and like a plan and like a pessimistic worldview. And Americans have been for centuries now, not centuries, but like for the last century, and increasingly so since 1913, 1933, and 1971 in stages, indefinitely optimistic, and maybe bordering toward like indefinitely pessimistic. And basically Bitcoin, anyone that gets infected by Bitcoin, what it does is it makes you definitely optimistic. You're actually moving toward an optimistic goal, and you can define it. Definitely, you can define what that goal is. And if you reach that goal, the world is better. And so it's just given so many people that get infected with Bitcoin in the best way possible, something to work for, like some real purpose. And that's why I think you see so many people like comparing it to religion, and it's an apt comparison because, there's not been anything other than devotion to your, friends and family, or, trying to do good for the world or whatever, and finding purpose in some of those things. There hasn't been anything that we could really work on that was definitely good for the world, but it's definitely good to take away the power of printing money away from central banks. That's definitely good. And it just has so many spillover effects, what we're seeing in, around the world with violence and all these things that we, from wars to, regulations that have just been passed and announced today in New York, even more, that are counter cryptocurrency, like just defunding all of that crap and making the government come and have to ask us for the money again instead of just printing it.
That's right.
It's going to be great.
I completely agree. I mean, it's really the taking away the money printing capability from the government. The same way, I forget who it was that mentioned this, separating church and state. It's the same type of thing with separating the money, right? They've obviously proven that they're incompetent, and it doesn't matter which government you talk about. When it comes to this, they're completely incompetent, and they're going to do whatever serves them best. And I want to go back to what you're talking about with, Bitcoin makes you, definitely optimistic. It absolutely does. And I have to say that before I got into Bitcoin, I had a definitely pessimistic view. And when I really, and I'm talking about after my shit coining and all that crap, when I really got into Bitcoin, that's when I became definitely optimistic, because I understood that it was going to incentivize positively. And when I say positively, I'm talking about incentivizing low time preference ideas. Like part of the, if we take a look around at everything, and I know we all know this, right? It's like, if the money is cheap, then everything that comes from it is cheap. You know what I mean? Like, if your base is crap, then everything that comes from it is going to be crap. So by making Bitcoin our base, everything that comes from it is strong, or at least everything that comes from it, I believe, should come from a place of quality. So it goes back to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was probably indefinitely optimistic.
Even before?
Indefinitely.
Oh, indefinitely. Okay.
It's kind of like this, like, wishy-washy view that things are like probably going to get better over time. Classic left coast, tech guy, and just being disappointed by, like, wait, why isn't it getting better? Like, this doesn't seem real. Like, there's no foundation. I think my professional career has been a story of just having foundations, that I thought were maybe solid, just being clearly exposed as BS. I was in tech and saw that bubble burst from front row seat at the turn of the millennium. And then I tried to get into like regular non-internet industry by working for places like McKinsey and going into private equity. And that clearly was complete BS. And so now what are we in? Now we just realize like the entire system, like it's not tech. It's not the whole like business and real estate world. Like now it's the entire system is the bubble. So the bubbles just keep getting bigger, and this one may last longer. I don't know. I don't know how long. One thing is they are actually incredibly competent. If you think about it, they've been able to keep this bull market going for the longest run in history.
That is a good point.
If their goal is to enrich people who have assets and make their assets worth more at the expense of people who who don't have assets. They're doing an incredible job at that. Their goal is to continue to consolidate more and more and more and more power with governments. They're doing an incredible job at that. They're super competent at that.
This is true.
Their goals are just counter to the people. I am interested to see like when the left actually understands how good Bitcoin is for the left. If your goal, like, you're not going to get socialism, but it's going to be better for the people, and it's gonna be interesting when people start to figure that out. I don't know what Alex Gladstein's politics are, but working for a Human Rights Foundation and some of the things that he's talked about, like, I wouldn't be surprised to see a D on a card there. I bet there are probably some closet liberals in Bitcoin that I think we need to somehow figure out a way to make Bitcoin really appeal to people across the spectrum.
So when we take a look at, like, it's interesting that you say that, and I know this is going to sound totally out of left field, but if we take a look at the movies and the things that resonate with people, common themes. There's common themes that resonate with all human beings. If we can make the Bitcoin narrative resonate with people at a core level, that's the key. You know what I mean? Like, when you take a look at things that are extremely successful in piercing ideas, why are they successful for piercing those ideas? They're successful because they appeal to us in a common archetypical way. It appeals to everyone.
Dogs, daughters, death, and dollars.
Dogs, daughters, death. I love it.
Yeah, it was like, you got like the kids, and you got your pets. You've got fear, and you've got greed, and I like alliteration. So there you go. Dogs, daughters, death, and dollars. That's what we need for Bitcoin.
The 4 Ds.
Yeah, 4 Ds of Bitcoin. So all the ads should have like dogs, daughters, death, and just fear of some sort. It is interesting. I was just like flipping through Twitter today, and there's a couple of gold companies advertising heavily against all Iran news.
Really?
Which makes sense. You're like, world's going to hell in a handbasket. Better get some gold.
That's true. And supposedly, what was it, like a couple of days ago, we had Bitcoin trading on, and again, I don't have this necessarily from a credible source, but I was told that it was trading on local Bitcoins in Iran for like 30K, a little bit higher than 30K.
Not true.
Not true, huh?
Not true. Yeah, there's 2 exchange rates there. There's the government official exchange rate that made it look like it was trading for like 30K. There's the street price of, I think it's reals, the Iranian currency. So the street price made Bitcoin like 7,500.
Okay, so the street price was closer to our price, in other words.
It's the same, exactly.
The same. Yeah. Okay. So that
carved away.
I appreciate you explaining that, because that's something I wasn't sure of, and I was like, really? Okay.
Same thing goes on in Venezuela. Like, the government rate is like 10 bolívares per dollar, but I think it's 115,000 for the street rate.
Oh wow.
That's how the army is. So the army in Venezuela has an exclusive distribution contract for food, and they get to buy the food for 10 bolívares per dollar, and then they sell it in a market that's 115,000 bolívares per dollar. That's why the military has so much money there.
That doesn't sound right.
It's not very nice if you think about it.
That sounds horrible.
It's okay, though. They raised the minimum wage, so now you can get 2 loaves of bread and 3 waters for 1/3 of your monthly salary.
All I'm hearing is that I should join the military there, because apparently they're the ones with the money. So...
Well, they definitely have the food.
They definitely have the food.
Yeah, they're the exclusive distributors of food in Venezuela.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so good idea. Join the military.
That doesn't sound right. I'm not a military guy. I still don't. Yeah, I don't believe in that stuff. But
you look like you could play like the radio operator, like the David Cross character, though. Like, in a Michael Bay film.
I appreciate that.
Definitely throw in some punchlines and like, that came out of nowhere.
That's awesome. Yeah. Oh gosh. Okay, so
I think I should let's do like maybe like 5 more minutes. Your last pressing questions, if you have any.
I was just gonna say, like, I totally appreciate you coming on. I just wanted to find out, like, what were you, if you have anything you want to leave with the Fun with Bitcoin podcast listeners, any last thoughts?
Listen, I feel really privileged to be alive when this community exists and at this moment in time. So I just think it's special to have people giving this much of their time and this much of their passion to any cause, and that it's a cause that's like this meaningful, and also just like this potentially enriching for the people that are stacking as we go. I am definitely optimistic about us all hanging out and drinking whiskey in like 2025, 2030, 2035, second and third generation Bitcoiners. Like, I think this is, what is it? If millennials were like 82 to 2000 and Gen Z is like 2000 to 2018, like this is clearly Generation B that just started getting born. My second daughter was born in March of 2018. I think she's one of the very first members of Generation Bitcoin.
Hey, congrats.
Thanks, man. So yeah, I'm excited to be here at this moment in time, building a company that's specifically focused on adoption. We basically, in our deck for these VCs, we say, we're taking people from a standing start and turning them into Bitcoiners, and then turning their fiat into BTC. And that's our mission. That's my goal. And it's what I've been wanting to do for a long time. And I finally have like a vehicle and a team to go do it. And that team is really, really strong. It's the kind of team that can, with no leader and no money, emerge totally victorious on the plains of battle on Nakamoto weekend, which was like, just a sniff of what it was like in 2017, which is a battle I did not participate in, but is already legend when you go back and read people and what they were writing about, contemporaneously. And things like that will come up again. There's going to be another one after that. And I think just being battle tested and having the channels with which we can, coordinate and fight it out amongst ourselves, like Martin wants to, so that we get sharper. Like it's good to test and sharpen your knives internally. It makes your enemies cower when you unify and unite when you have to.
I totally agree, and beautifully
said. Against my cousin, me and my brother and my cousin against our neighbor, me and our neighbors against the next village, and we just keep on expanding out. And I think we are a worldwide nation of Bitcoiners, and the other nations with borders and boundaries had better beware.
Very well said. Very well said. So I'm going to post. What's the best way for people to reach you?
So Givebitcoin.io is the website. SwanBitcoin.com, just redirect to that. I'm Cory Klippsten on Twitter, and we're active. Give_Bitcoin, save_Bitcoin. We're everywhere. Follow Brady. Follow Jan. Follow me.
All right, very cool. We're going to put that in the show notes. Cory, thank you again very much for coming on my show. I really appreciate it, man. This is amazing.
Yeah, cheers, bro.
Cheers. We'll talk soon. Hope everybody enjoyed that conversation with Cory. I had an absolute wild time. Anyways, all the details will be in the show notes. His contact information, of course, will also be in the show notes. And, of course, if you want to reach me on Telegram or Twitter, I'm at CoinIcarus. If you want to catch me, shoot me an email, I'm coinicarus@funwithbitcoin.com. And if you want to check out all things Fun with Bitcoin, just head over to funwithbitcoin.com. And if you want to support the podcast, you can head over to moetarags.com and then go to All Clothing and Fun with Bitcoin podcast, and you can check out our merch. Catch you all next time. Thanks for listening.